Today I will be discussing my 1-month experiment using a continuous glucose monitor. I'm not a physician, nor am I an expert on glucose or CGMs. I'll just simply be sharing my very personal and layman's experience with one of these devices. Our producer, Estella, will be asking me a series of questions, and I hope you glean some good insight. This is the Kathleen Sessions podcast. Thank you very much and enjoy the conversation. Well, hello, Estella.
Hello.
This is going to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what do you have for me?
So why did you choose to do this?
Why did I choose to try a continuous glucose monitor? I'm guessing is your question. I forever, from my earliest recollection, have had problems with energy crashes throughout the day. Really bad, debilitating energy crashes. I'd have great, steady, wonderful energy in the mornings typically, and then brutal crashes in the afternoon. I remember even in elementary school, barely being able to get through the afternoons. I know that I'm not unique in that. I know that everybody struggles a bit with energy fluctuations throughout the day, and a lot of people struggle with like mid-afternoon, but so much of my life was consumed by that on a day-to-day basis and I felt like I lost so much productivity, and it just was a big issue. So probably like 10 or 15 years ago, I gave up sugar for a year. At the time, before that, I didn't really know, especially when I was younger, that there was maybe a connection between the food I was putting in my body and that happening, right? I just thought this is how I'm wired. I'm someone who just can't hold their energy throughout the day. And then, as more research came out and stuff, I started to learn a little bit more. So about 10 or 15 years ago, I decided for a year to give up sugar. And for me, that simply meant no desserts or candy, ice cream, or like sugared beverages. I wasn't like anal about every added sugar thing. It was more just the obvious sugar things. And for that year, my energy was so much better. I couldn't believe it. My productivity was so much better. I didn't have that deep need to take like an afternoon nap. So many things were better. And I felt like I kind of learned the lesson. And then, time went by, and I'm sure it lost its hold on me a little bit, but just recently I got some not so great blood results regarding my glucose levels from my doctor. In fact, I got one set of results and thought I was going to be really good and turn those around. And then about 6 months later, I got another set of results and they had gotten even worse. And I thought, I need to do something about this. I was pissed because I thought I take pretty good care of myself, right? I eat pretty well. Like, what the heck? I mean, I remember being shocked and really sort of mad about it, but also determined that if there was something I could do, in advance of heading into type 2 diabetes or in advance of needing medications, that I was going to do something. And I had been hearing about the CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors. I listened to a few different health podcasts, by an MD and another's by a super awesome health researcher. And I had heard them talking about them, and I'd obviously seen them in the press and that sort of thing. But once I got those results, I realized I needed to understand more what was happening inside my body, what was causing my glucose to spike, what was leading me down this path that could lead me to insulin insensitivity. So I decided to get one. And I have to admit, I think for a long time, even though I had been interested even before I got those results, I'd been slightly interested. Once I got the results, I still had that barrier of like, it's expensive. Like I felt like cost had been a barrier. And but I had gotten some money for Christmas, a couple $100 that I had squirreled away. And then I got like another $100 for my birthday. And I had intended to spend that on something else, something fun. But once I got these results, I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to spend that money on because I am determined to try to address this and be proactive. So that's why I did it. I wanted to understand if there was anything I was doing day in and day out that could change, that could move me and my results, my test results, in a better direction and stave off type 2 diabetes. And that's hard for me to even say out
What
loud. I
were
mean, I feel like I've been healthy for so long. I couldn't, I still am in a little shock that I actually was heading down that path.
so after wearing this device for a month, what were some of your biggest takeaways?
Well, I was shocked how instantaneous of the feedback. Like this device, you put it on the back of your arm. You can kind of see it through my shirt here. It's this like black circle here. This device that you put on the back of your arm, you basically scan it with your phone, and then your phone has an app that spits out like where you're at in terms of your glucose. And it's not only tracking where you're at this moment, but where you've been. So it records things 8 hours up to 8 hours at a time. So as long as you're scanning every 8 hours, you can see like what your glucose is doing throughout the day. And I guess I was shocked how immediate that information was. I was shocked how much control I had over how high my glucose spiked and how high it stayed spiked. There was just the whole experience pretty much blew me away. And I'll maybe ask you to ask some more specific questions about that. But overall, that was the biggest. I think that was the biggest overall surprise. And yeah.
And so talk a little bit about what made your glucose spike so much or stay low or stay in the healthy range.
Well, one of the things that I'll say is that they do. So the device that I ended up using, I ordered through a company called Nutrisense, and they do a really good job of providing education that goes along with what you're seeing, so that they talk about, generally speaking, what the research shows in terms of the foods that'll spike your glucose, generally speaking, what things you can do to mitigate that based on the research, but really driving home the point that it's highly individual as well. So if even the generally speaking research shows X, Y, or Z, what's going on in your body based on all the factors going on in your life are going to be like very personal. So it was super helpful to like hear their education and their advice and their research combined with what was going on in my own body. But the so on a very general basis, they know that carbs will be something that is more likely to spike your glucose versus something like fats or protein. And one of the things with Nutrisense, I think one of their just taglines, which I think is phrases that they use a lot in the educational pieces, is no naked carbs. No naked carbs. And I think that's so beautiful, because what I saw very directly, if I had naked carbs, if I had carbs on their own, I would spike, right? So for me personally, I'll give a very specific example. And for the first few days, they tell you to just eat, and don't try to shape it too much. Eat, notate what you eat, and then see what happens with your glucose. And so the very first day, and I'm not proud to admit this, but it's the truth. The very first day, I had a hamburger and French fries together as one meal. And I was kind of thinking in the back of my head, yeah, this is fast food. This isn't good for me, but I'm going to eat my hamburger first. And because the little bit I already know about this stuff, if I have my protein first, it should help mitigate things. Well, I had the hamburger and the French fries, and then I scanned and I looked at the results, and my glucose blew up. It blew way past the high end of the healthy range and hit like 20 points beyond that. And it was a wake up call. It was an absolute wake up call. Um, to what was going on in my body was directly related to what I was putting into my body. And so the next night I decided to do an experiment. So they have you experimenting a lot with different foods and combinations of foods and what to eat with or before certain foods. So the next night, and this is going to make it sound like I'm this massive meat eater, which I'm not necessarily, but the next night we were going out to dinner with friends, and I ordered a steak and some French fries. The steak came with French fries. That was like your side option, and there was a vegetable in there as well. So I decided to, based on what I was learning, eat the meat first. So I had the entire steak first. Then I had my vegetables and some French fries. And when I, scanned and looked at the results, by doing it, so that second night, my results, my glucose spiked less than half the amount as the first time. And I think the difference was I didn't have a bun on the steak, right? So like I had my protein first, but I also didn't have a bun the way I had a bun on the burger. And the difference, I stayed within the healthy range the second night. It went up. Anytime you eat, your glucose is most likely going to raise to some extent. But the point is to stop it from spiking so much and to keep it within a healthy range and to keep the variability, in a healthier way versus spiking up and then back down and up and then back down. So anyway, it was a very direct example of one meal one night versus another meal the next night. Both had pretty much the same constituents in terms of, but one didn't have the bun. And then the other thing that happened is, and this probably also contributed to not spiking as high, but because I ate my entire steak first before I had any of the French fries, I was also more full by the time I got to the French fries. And so organically, I just didn't eat as many. So I didn't eat as many French fries. So I guess there was some differences in the meal related to that, but that also was helpful information overall about a healthier way to approach a meal. Like if I eat the protein first, I'll have less of a desire to eat the carbs and again keep my glucose in a healthier range. So that was just an interesting right out of the gates sort of experiment that happened. And
Yeah, protein is definitely so much more satiating than any carb you could have. So kind of going off of, you were talking about how you started eating protein and then carbs. What are some other changes you've made from using this device, whether it be food order, food types, or exercise, or anything of that matter?
Well, I think first and foremost for those first handful of days, it was about just watching the data, eating what I would normally eat or whatever the case was, and then seeing what happened. And I, again, was so surprised at the instantaneous data of what's going on in my body and the immediate impact it would have on my behavior. So my behavior was instantly changing, not just because, oh, I've got this data piece, or just not because of just the more academic knowledge of it, but I could directly see if I change the behavior, if I change the order of the foods I'm eating on my plate, if I change the time of day I'm eating, if I change the way that I'm moving my body before or after, which we'll get to in a little bit, I saw an immediate impact and it was so rewarding. So they give you a range. I mean, again, there's so much wonderful education that comes along, at least with the company that I chose to use, but I'm guessing this is across the board for many of these companies, but there's so much great information. And one of them is that, they're trying to help you keep your glucose within what's called a healthy range. I'm not even going to talk about the range because it's beside the point, but within a healthy range. So every time you eat and then scan, you see a graph that shows where your glucose went, and if it went out of range, either too high or too low. That feedback loop of seeing the direct result of your actions, whether it's negative reaction because of, something you ate, or positive reaction because of a positive change that you made, was so encouraging and so instantaneously created new habits in me. That was what was interesting. I felt like my habits shifted much faster than they maybe would have just by knowing something is generally speaking good for you or bad for you. When you could see in real time what's happening in your body and you have control over that, it was quite empowering.
Can you talk about some of those specific habits, such as you had alluded to exercise? How does that play a role in your glucose levels?
So one of the things that they educate you on, generally speaking, and I'm always going to keep making this distinction because there's research that is generalized and then there's what's happening in your body. So I can really only speak, and as I've mentioned at the beginning, I'm only speaking to my direct experience as a layperson. But while you're learning about what's happening in your body, they're also educating you about the research, but they're doing it in such a way that you can understand it. And so they talk a lot about, generally speaking, how exercising after a meal. So if you've eaten and your glucose spikes, no matter how high it spiked, right? If you exercise after a meal, the that exercise will help pull the glucose out of your blood, so you don't need as much insulin to come in and try and save the day. So if you exercise immediately after a meal, it's going to have a beneficial effect on your overall glucose scores. That's what the research shows. When I conducted the experiment and I had a meal on one day where I didn't like go for a walk afterward versus the next day I had the exact same meal and I went for a walk afterward, I could see that direct relationship. If I end my meal and go for a walk, I can actually pull my glucose down faster than if I wouldn't have done that. So the exercise, what in terms of what they were sharing played out in the generalized research, really actually played out in my particular body. I could see that. And they talk about exercising after a meal, and, preferably if you're able to go for a walk, make it a brisk walk, but don't discount. I mean, if you can't go for a fast walk, go for a slow walk. If you can't go out for a walk, do something where you're contracting your muscles. By contracting your muscles in any way, you're reducing your glucose levels. So that was fascinating to me. That, again, maybe I probably had learned that somewhere along the way, and had heard it. And I think, generally speaking, I like to exercise. So on a weekly basis, there were probably several times I would maybe go for a walk after a meal, but now seeing the direct impact on my glucose really drove home the fact that that is something that I want to be part of my life. Because again, I want to stave off type 2 diabetes and want to stave off potentially having to go on medications. So knowing that I could have such an immediate and direct impact was pretty exciting. The flip side, in terms of, they also talk about research of exercising before a meal, and that exercise before a meal can also have a positive impact on your glucose and what you're about to eat. And I found that to be the case for me. So as well. So as there was one time where I ran a 3-day experiment, and they have you doing lots of just personal experiments so you can understand what's going on in your body. So one day I just ate a meal, didn't exercise before or after to see where I landed in terms of my glucose. The next day I ate the same meal and exercised afterward, and I could see how quickly I was able to drop those glucose. It did spike from my meal, but I was able to more quickly bring it down because I did the exercise after. On the third day, I did a walk before, then I came back and I ate, and then I did a walk after. And what happened on that day was, not only did I bring those glucose levels down, they didn't spike as high to begin with. So by exercising beforehand, I was able to ease my spike. So I had the same exact food, but I went for a walk beforehand and it didn't spike as much. And then I was able to bring it back down from exercise afterwards. So again, that's what happened in my body. That may or may not happen in yours, but it was really empowering. And I felt like it's a lesson you won't unlearn. Once you see that playing out on the graph, you're not going to unsee it. Like it is, we have immense power over, um, there are certain things we don't have power over, but this we really, many of us will have direct power over.
And kind of going off of that, were there any other things that you were looking at during this first month, like your sleep or your stress related to your glucose levels?
Well, they talk a lot in the educational piece. And I'm guessing a lot of our listeners will have heard, different research or different information that's out there in the media about the fact that lack of sleep can adversely affect our glucose, meaning our glucose is more likely to be higher and spike if we don't sleep as well. And the same holds true for stress. The more stress we're under, generally speaking, they talk about the research showing a negative impact on our glucose. Um, what I didn't do this first month, I was so focused. I was like really laser focused on the foods, which foods spiked my glucose, which combination of foods, the timing of foods, what order I ate the foods that were on my plate. I was really hyper focused on both the foods and then the exercise piece. And because maybe this was all new to me, being it was my first month, I was excited to learn about, generally speaking, the sleep and stress side of things. But I felt like I didn't focus on that this first month because everything was so new to me, and I didn't want to have too many variables that were kind of confounding what I was learning from the CGM. So I stayed focused on the foods, and I stayed focused on the exercise piece. And then my goal, I was only going to do this for a month, but now I'm going to do it for another month. In fact, I can totally at this point seeing this be a continuous part of my life. Maybe I would like give it a break in the summer months when I'm more sleeveless, which I know we'll get to that in a moment. But the information is so helpful, that I could see having this be a continuous part of my life. But originally I was only going to do it 1 month. Now I'm going to do it a second month. And I think in this second month, I will be able to have look at more of those nuances related to sleep, related to stress. There are some other things I didn't really have an opportunity to pay as much attention to. And so how it plays out is that in the glucose, in the app, you're adding, you're documenting what you ate. So you can see, if you want to look back, you can see directly how a meal impacted your glucose. You want to remember from a week ago, why did I blow past, the healthier range? What did I eat that day? You can see it. But there's also places within the map or in the app where you can document how well you slept, what your stress level is, where you can make notes. So I can see that second month being really, really productive in terms of now turning to those components. I know academically and generally speaking, and from the research, that those have an impact, but I want to see what is the impact on my personal body, my personal glucose scores. Yeah. So I see that as month 2. So we might have to do a follow-up episode to this to kind of get into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it sounds like you've had a really impactful experience with this device, and especially since you're planning to use it for a second month. Um, since you've had such a good experience, who or would you recommend this device? And if so, to whom?
I would recommend this, highly recommend it. I think even for me at first it was a little confusing, like, oh, is this only if you already have diabetes? When these first came out, it was a little confusing. I remember doing some of the research, and it was a little unclear because it talks about you needing a prescription. And I guess I'll pause there related to the prescription. So yes, you need a prescription, but you're able to do it through telehealth within whatever company you choose. So again, I chose Nutrisense. There are other companies out there. Nutrisense has telehealth available that, yes, after you go through a questionnaire, then you can get the prescription for the continuous glucose monitor. But I think in the last 3 to 6 months, overall, I think the communication about who this is for has gotten much better, meaning you do not have to already have diabetes to use a continuous glucose monitor. In fact, I think that's where the beauty lies, because I think the more people in the general public who are using it, we have the potential to avoid, because when we know better, especially the way you learn it in this, when we know better, we do better. And if more of us have the ability to stave off type 2 diabetes, just imagine the absolute impact that would mean on our healthcare system overall, on physicians, on us as individuals. So I think where the massive opportunity as a country, as a world, is for catching it in real time or ahead of the game, or even when we're young, so that we can course correct and establish better behaviors, so that we don't head in that direction. Then separate from societal, from a society perspective and an overall healthcare perspective, just as an individual, I can't imagine who wouldn't benefit from this. I guess again, I'm speaking as a layperson. I'm no expert on this, but maybe, like, just as I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe if you're someone who is super obsessive, and this would just cause you to obsess more, you got to be honest with yourself about that, right? That maybe this wouldn't be the best kind of device. Or maybe people who have eating disorders and again, I'm no expert in any of that, but if it would cause you to use the information to rationalize or justify, or maybe again make you more obsessive about food or no food or whatever the case is, that could be a place where it maybe wouldn't be the right choice. But my experience has been just so incredible that I could see this for everyone. And I guess that's what I'm hoping for in terms of cost. Because again, cost was a barrier for me that I was able to, I ended up justifying by scrapping together some money from gifts. But I guess I'm hoping that the more awareness overall there becomes about this, and maybe the more generalized use, that the pricing can come down. And that more options would be available. I'm not sure how this plays out in terms of insurance across the board if you don't already have type 2 diabetes, but you would think the insurers, who have to pay for all the drugs that people have to go on once they have type 2 diabetes, and all the procedures that have to be done once your body starts to break down from type 2 diabetes, you would think that the insurers would think it's a really good idea to get these into healthy people earlier, so that they can avoid the back end costs, which I would think would be way more expensive than the front end cost of doing this. But generally speaking, I'm really hopeful that the more that these are used in the general public, that the pricing, even if insurance isn't an option, that it's more accessible from a price point perspective. And you can already, they have it set up where if you are doing longer use. So I did it the most expensive way, unfortunately. I did it for the 1 month, which is the most expensive way to do it. But I wasn't ready to commit to something beyond that. I wanted to make sure the information and the data was going to be useful to me. I had heard, through different physicians that have used these, that generally speaking, you can glean so much information from just a month that it can have a lasting impact on your behaviors. And so that's for all those reasons, I chose the 1 month. And again, now I'm going to commit to a second month. But they already have it set up where if you're going to do longer stints, the pricing comes down. So I'm just hoping that over time, that the more this gets more generally used, that this is going to be way more accessible for everybody, because I know that that's currently a barrier.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about why you chose Nutrisense over other brands that are available on the market?
There's no specific reason. I think I was just researching a lot of different companies. I think maybe they were the one that, maybe it was just some of the stuff on their website that made it the most clear that you didn't have to already be diabetic, to do this. I think that communication overall has gotten better across all the companies, but maybe it just really, there was maybe something about the way they worded it or something about the way that they showed how easy it was to use or something that got me. I don't think I remember that there was a big difference in terms of pricing. I could be wrong on that, so please do your own research. But there must have been something, but and what, because I've not used any of the other products, I have no idea whether to say Nutrisense is better than Levels or better than the other companies that are out there. What I can say is my personal experience with Nutrisense has been super positive in terms of the ease of use, in terms of um, the education piece that goes along with it, in terms of the onboarding, which we can talk about in a second. In terms of the way that the information is displayed. So the way that it's displayed, it's just like, it so clearly shows you what is happening in your body versus the behavior you just took, that it has that immediate impact on your behavior. And I just, and your habits. And I guess I'm not sure how that is displayed in other products or how good their supportive education is. It could be as good. I'm just not sure. But also with Nutrisense, they assign you a nutritionist for your first month that is a real person who you can go to with questions. And so I reached out to my nutritionist a couple times. I had a couple of, concerns early on, that she helped me
Mm-hmm.
sort through what I was seeing. And I found that to be super helpful. I mean, I didn't use her a ton, but the little bit I did, she was super helpful. And she looked back across my history and made comments and suggestions. And that was helpful.
So you decided to go with Nutrisense and talk a little bit about your onboarding experience with them, putting the device on your arm, the videos, the how to, all of that.
Yeah, I consider myself relatively tech savvy, but I was a little nervous as to like the whole getting it in the mail. In fact, I just got my one for next month in this little box that my microphone is on. So it comes like in a box in the mail, and then I just wasn't sure how that was going to go, and was a little nervous about it. Was a little nervous whether or not it would hurt, putting the sensor on, and but they make it so easy. I will say that was one thing that impressed me so much. The supportive videos and how to's, just from the technical how to's, like what's in your box, what goes where, how you put it on. They're so clear in both their language in the written part, but also in the videos, that it made it really, really easy. So the how to's from a technical perspective were great. Um, I think, well, and I'll also say, so along those lines, I had been worried is the wrong word, but I had been thinking about, will this hurt, or I'm expecting it to hurt, even though like some of the doctors I've heard talk about them has said that they really don't hurt. And even though there were testimonials of people saying it doesn't hurt, in the onboarding instructions, it talks about you might feel a little bit of a pinch as you press it in. And so I was kind of just braced for that way, like when you go to the doctor and you're going to get a shot, the shot's not going to really hurt, but it's going to be something. I was sort of braced like that. But I literally, you just put it here and then you press, and I felt nothing. I felt zero. I felt nothing go in. Suddenly it wasn't on, and then it was on. So there was no pain or anything associated with it. It was, and then after the sensor's in, you put this Band-Aid thing over it, which is like you put this Band-Aid thing over it. But it was super easy. And so from a technical standpoint, the onboarding from Nutrisense was fantastic. I think what I was more impressed by, though, was also the supporting education. So you start like on day one watching these educational videos that are talking in general about glucose and insulin resistance, and what the research shows about what foods when, and carbs versus proteins versus fat, and no naked carbs is one of the things that I'd mentioned earlier. So no naked carbs, and eating your fats and proteins before your carbs, and they did a really good job with all of the education that goes along with what you're seeing is going on in your body via your app. So you're watching these videos each day that really help you understand, how this works generally speaking, and then you can see it in real time in your body. So the onboarding was really good, and I will admit I was worried about that. I was worried that
Hmm.
it would be technically kind of clunky, and that I'd be sort of not being able to make sense of what I was seeing in terms of the results, but they make it crystal clear. Yeah.
Hmm. And so once the device was on your arm and you were out in public, did you feel comfortable wearing sleeveless shirts or showing that you had a CGM on your arm?
It's interesting because I didn't really think about that on the upfront in terms of ahead of time thinking, oh, what's it going to be like to like wear this if I'm wearing something sleeveless? Um, the one with Nutrisense, at least the one they sent, comes with like this black Band-Aid thing that goes over it. You wear it on the back of your arm, and every 2 weeks you change your sensor, and then you usually change your arm. But the very first time I was going to go out in public and wear something sleeveless, I have to admit, I ended up having this pause. Like it was just not something I thought about ahead of time. And then I'm like, oh, do I want that? Do I want to wear this out in public or show this? Should I just put on a long sleeve shirt? And I think two things were going on for me. Whether they're right or wrong, they were. So I'm just going to share them, just my human experience. The first thing was just aesthetic. Like as silly as that sounds, it was like, oh, do I want to wear a sleeveless shirt and have this black thing on the back of my arm? I had that moment, right? Um, but then the flip
Hmm.
side was that I am so blown away about continuous glucose monitoring and what I'm experiencing, and what the potential impact on us as a society and our healthcare system and on individuals' experience, day-to-day experience in their lives. I feel so strongly about that I'm like, okay, if I'm wearing something sleeveless and it helps spread the word or get someone to ask me a question and I can help answer questions or debunk any concerns that they have, like the public service side of me, which this, it is part of who I am. Like I want to get the word out about things that can make a meaningful difference. And so from that perspective, like that helped mitigate the fact that, oh, do I want this black thing on my arm? And what's that going to look like? So I ended up like, if I'm wearing something sleeveless, I'm wearing something sleeveless, and just sort of, uh, not over not overthink it. I guess I just do it. I know there are some people who probably are like, it's kind of like a flex, right? Like people who are really into health and wellness and at the gym all the time. I see a lot of people wearing, having them on their arm. And for some people, it might be like, just a statement about how much they care about their health, or that they like wearing it from that standpoint. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. But yeah.
Hmm. And was there anything about your experience with Nutrisense or the device in general that you wish was different?
Well, there's so much more I want to dive into, but one of the things, this is such a small thing, but yet, it seems like it'd be really, really easy for them to fix, is that when like I said, you change your device every 2 weeks. And when you press the little, sensor into your arm, and then you put that black Band-Aid over it. After 2 weeks, you go to the other arm. The problem is they send one Band-Aid per sensor. And so and maybe we'll post some pictures online of what my sensor actually looks like when I'm not wearing a button up shirt, like long sleeve shirt like this. But over time, the edges, just like when you're wearing a Band-Aid, how the edges of the Band-Aid start to sort of roll up or curl up, that starts to happen. And I've noticed, especially if I'm immersing myself, you can be immersed in water. In fact, I think it says you can be up to 30 minutes fully immersed without any problems with your sensor at all. And I noticed there was one 2 week period where I took more baths. It was colder out than I did the other 2 week period. And I noticed that the week I took the baths, it curled up even more. And so to me, a simple fix, and I wish is that I wish they would send more than one of the Band-Aid coverings per sensor, so that if your current one gets rolled up at the ends, you could change it, because when it's rolled up, it's, then the sticky part is a little bit of exposed. So as you're putting on and off your clothes, sometimes it's catching on your clothes. Generally speaking, I don't feel it at all. I couldn't even tell you half the time if I've got one on. It's not like I'm aware I have it on, but if the Band-Aid's starting to curl up and I'm putting on and off my clothes, it can kind of snag, and then it starts to not look as good, like toward the end of that 2 week period. Like I might choose to wear something longer sleeve if it's kind of like just gnarly around the edges. There might be a reason. There might be a reason they don't do that. I mean, maybe they are worried that if you're pulling the Band-Aid on and off, it might disrupt the sensor. I guess I'm not quite sure, because it seems like that would be a simple fix. One of the things that was an important takeaway, there were so many things I learned about what the things I ate and what it did to my body, the order in which I ate that food, all the different experiments I could do that could show me, by making changes, how that I could keep my glucose in the healthy range. And I learned very fast, and I don't think I'm alone. I think most of us would be like this. That's an assumption, but I think most of us would learn very, very quickly. That's the beauty of this, how quickly you can see and then learn to keep your glucose within the healthy range. And again, because you can see it, they display it in a graph, and you can see exactly when you go above and when you go below, and it's so visual. That's what's so beautiful about it. And you can see, like, if you experiment with a different meal the next day, and you change the order of what you eat, or you change if you exercise before or after, or you cut something out, you can see that impact, and it results in changed behavior. So you very quickly learn how to keep your glucose within the healthy range. And again, I think I'll learn even more about that next month as I start to more dive into what's the impact on when I'm not sleeping as well, or of stress on all of this. But the one thing that happens is you really learn that, if I have some healthy fats or some proteins before I have the carbs, well, that'll help me not spike. So one little trap I fell into was that I started reaching for, like, walnuts, which are healthy. It's a healthy fat. It's wonderful, right? But I was reaching for a pretty big handful each time, to have some walnuts and some healthy fat before I had the carb. And no matter what, if you have 16 bowls of walnuts in a day, and yes, you're able to keep your glucose in a healthy range, you're still most likely going to be consuming way more calories than your body can use, even with exercise. And so you're going to put on weight, right? So I think you have to be careful as you're finding the nuance here and keeping yourself in the range, that the tactics you're using to keep yourself in the range, you're still being mindful overall of the energy need, the caloric needs of your body, because otherwise you're going to gain weight, which also comes with its own, conundrums, even if you're able to keep your glucose within a healthier range. So I really wanted to share that with everyone, because if you don't know that in advance, it could be, it could have an impact on your weight. So, Estella, I'm curious, from your perspective. I mean, we have a bit of an age gap. You're younger than I am by a few decades, and I'm curious, from your perspective, is continuous glucose monitoring something that's on your radar? Like as a younger person, is it something you've heard about? Is it something you're interested in? And if so, what are potential barriers if because I know you haven't done this yet, but like why not if it's something you're interested in?
Yeah, I'm definitely personally very interested in my own health and wellness. I have multiple gym memberships. I've bought an Aura ring. I have an Apple Watch. I'm very conscious about what foods I put into my body. However, I do not have a CGM, and I have heard about it through Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, and other health podcasts. And I definitely am interested in it. The biggest thing for me is the cost. Not to say that I wouldn't spend the money, but I do know at this point that I'm aware of the things that impact glucose. So I definitely try to eat my foods in a specific order, walk before or after meals. I exercise regularly. I do a lot of the things that I think you were speaking to that you learned about or that you really started implementing once you got all that feedback. I would be interested in purchasing it to look at the nuances of my glucose levels. So things such as stress and sleep. I'd really like to see that aspect of it. I'm not as interested in the food part, partially because I think I know for the most part what spikes my glucose. So I think in the future or eventually I will get one just to try it out. And like I said, look at those finer details of what is impacting my glucose levels. Um, but as of right now, I've chose to invest in things such as fitness, a sleep tracker, and healthy foods.
Well, and the cool thing about all those things is, generally speaking, the research shows that those have a positive impact on glucose, right? So even if you're not doing the glucose monitor per se, you're already doing a lot of the behaviors that will hopefully keep you in the healthy range. Um, yeah, this was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of fun. Thank you so much for asking such good questions.
Yes, thank you. It was very interesting.
So I'm guessing we will be doing a follow-up to this show after I complete my second month. Maybe we'll look more specifically at the sleep and stress impacts. Uh, I know, Stella, you had some questions about the alcohol impact, which we didn't get to today, which I will talk about more in the next episode after this next month, because although I have some early information, something I'm gonna pay much closer attention to in the second month. So I think we'll save that for then. I have a request for the audience. I have a request for all of you. And that is that since we're going to be doing a follow up episode, what questions do you have for me about the experience with the continuous glucose monitor? I am obviously not in general, I'm not an expert, as I mentioned at the beginning. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on glucose or on the CGMs, generally speaking. But if you have questions about my experience or anything I said today, you're looking for clarification, I would be happy to answer those in that second episode. So I'll have a few asks for you right now. So, as you know, you're listening to the Kathleen Sessions podcast. I'll ask that if you're not already, please subscribe to the Kathleen Sessions on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And know that our website is theKathleenSessions.com. So it's through the website at theKathleenSessions.com that you could send us your questions. And I am dying to hear. Well, I'm also curious if you've used one. If you've used one, can you send a testimonial or things that you liked or problems you ran into? I'd be very, very interested to know that as well. And we can maybe discuss a couple of those things on the air in that second episode as well. So I am really grateful. I'm really grateful to you, Estella. I'm really grateful to the audience. I'm really grateful to have had this experience with the CGM and to share the information with everyone today. So have a beautiful day, everyone. We will see you shortly. Bye.